Good morning and welcome to everybody to this, the SHORG Conference 2020. I'm Charles Sercombe, currently the chairman of SHORG, a sheep farmer from Melton Mowbray in Leicestershire who cares passionately about our industry and has been involved in a number of organisations for a number of years trying to promote best practice and sheep farming and to make sure that we get a fair crack of the whip in our lobbying that we do to a number of organisations to promote the industry that we're all proud to be part of. Now, this is a new event, being digital for the very first time. We've held numerous successful SHORG conferences over numbers of years. And some of the things that I'll talk about later, I've had to embrace due to the exceptional circumstances that we've all faced this year. And change has led us to go into this digital way of delivering our conference. And I hope that everybody enjoys it and makes the most of it and gets as much out of it as they previously did the physical conferences that we held biannually. The purpose of the event today is to try and disseminate some of the work that's going on out in the industry and to discuss how we can work together for world-leading health and welfare in the sheep that we look after in the UK. We need to encompass all that's going to be discussed today and take that forward to make sure that we can and are proud to be part of a world-leading industry. I, for one, believe that we do have a world-class sheep industry in the UK. I say that because I've been very fortunate in my time to travel to many countries in the rest of the world where they keep sheep, whether it's in North and South America, Australia and New Zealand, to China, for several countries in mainland Europe. And I state for the record here that I genuinely believe that we have some of the very best sheep in the world, and we certainly have some of the very best sheep farmers in the world. And at times, I think we do fail to get that message out to the wider public and the wider population. And we should be proud of what we do and we achieve on a daily basis and the work that we do to promote the health and welfare of those animals that we look after. Today, we also launch the SHORG 2020 report, our biannual report that lists the state of the sheep industry as we see it as an organisation. This will be the third and final report, and to my mind is an incredible piece of work, which I'm very grateful for all the people who have contributed, and I thank you personally and on behalf of the whole of the SHORG group for the work and effort that you've put into this. It's a really, really good document that is one point of reference for much of the work that's been carried out in the sheep industry in the UK over the last few years. And I'm personally incredibly pleased to see the vote of thanks and the endorsement that the group has received from all four of the chief vets in the UK. It means a lot to both myself personally and to all the other people in the group who have contributed and their work and effort they've put in over the years to see that being recognised and receiving the praise and thanks that I think everybody thoroughly deserves for the work they've done. Onto the report, that will be available. That is available now. If you look onto your platform and you click on industry reports, it's also more widely available on the SHORG website. Before I continue with my introduction, I do have some bits of housekeeping for people. Now, at this stage of a normal conference, I will be going through where the fire drill exits are and say that there's no fire drills planned. Now, hopefully there are no fire drills planned for today in any of the venues where people are watching. And I hope we all stay safe and well. But I did sort of sit here thinking what I was going to say. And then as I sit here in my slippers, think I could never envisage chairing and doing an open address to a conference in a shirt and tie, but slippers below. It's one of these things that all the meetings that we've been involved in over the last 6 months, we only see the torsos of the top half of people's bodies. Now, if we really want you to get involved in today, it is supposed to be an active conference. You can use social media using the hashtag SHORG 2020. There are ways to navigate around the event on the platforms that you're hopefully watching on. The left-hand menus give you the access to do that. We would really want you to be involved in the feed and converse and interact with fellow delegates to know what you think of the conference. But if you do have any issues with the conference platform, there are digital event frequently asked questions in the menu on the left, or you can contact the help page. And also, please use the conference platform in between sessions to visit our sponsors pages and connect with other attendees. Talking about sponsors, they are been greatly supportive of SURG since we started, and we couldn't run events like this without the support of all our sponsors today. So thank you very much to AHDB, Datamars Livestock, Elanco, and MSD Animal Health in particular. As I say, during the course of the day, there will be plenty of opportunities for delegates to tap in and to see what the sponsors are providing and what they can offer to help develop your businesses going forward. Now, each session will be recorded on the platform, and should you really want to revisit any of it afterwards, it'll be there and available for people to view. One of the most exciting things today is that we'll be awarding a social butterfly prize. That's something new to me, and as I say, change is coming. We have to encompass it. And as somebody who's not a particularly active person on social media, probably I won't be in the running to win the prize myself. But I'm sure there's some of you out there who are really, really, really great exponents of this. So the person or the delegate who makes the most use of the virtual platform will be given a prize at the end of the day, and we will be announcing that as I wrap up the conference later on. Those of you watching who are RAMers or SQPs, formerly SQPs, who are doing this for your AMTRA points, there is a form that you can complete on the left-hand side of the menu if you need to. And finally, as always with these things, and I've had this underlined and in bold print from the organising team to make sure I don't forget to say it, please complete the feedback form so we can improve any future events that we open to run, whether under this platform or other platforms as time goes on. We are, I think, as I alluded to earlier, at a pivotal time in our industry, as a country as a whole, and certainly the sheep industry, with the potential looming effects of Brexit, is still at a very uncertain stage. But in my mind, it's amazing what difference a year makes, and the amount of confidence that's in this industry as I speak here before you today, compared to what I would have done 12 months ago. And that's purely because of the returns that we've been able to get from the marketplace for the sheep that we rear and sell. The industry has never been as buoyant in my time as it has been this autumn. The price of finished lambs and finished stock as at record levels for the time of year. This has filtered through into the breeding stock and the confidence that that's provided. And it's absolutely essential in my mind that this continues, because if we have a profitable industry, farmers are notoriously good at reinvesting those profits, whether it is in the value of breeding stock, whether it is in the support of other industries that provide provisions to ourselves. And particularly, it is in my opinion, what we're talking about today, in the provision of animal health and welfare to the sheep. Because as sheep become more valuable and our assets are worth more, it will pay us hand over fist to protect those assets. And therefore, more correct use of vaccinations, preventative rather than being proactive, rather than fire brigade treatments for our stock. It will encourage people to improve even more so the health and welfare of the animals that we look after. And that fully endorses one of the key messages that SURG has put out over the years, that is plan, prevent, and protect the animals we look after. We are much more able to invest when we're making money, and everybody will benefit it. That also leads on to where we are with Brexit and the transition. Now, none of us know where we're going to be in the new year, not even the people concluding the negotiations. I'm in the same position as everybody else, that I really wish that they would get on, sort something out so everybody knows where they stand. Unfortunately, however well they do or whatever deal they get, I'm certain there will be a limited impact initially on the sheep industry, and it could be a major one as we move forward. But we mustn't lose faith that the industry that we're all proud to be part of will survive, will come through the other side, and still will be providing that world-leading product that we're all proud to be associated with. And why are we so proud to be associated with it? Well, sheep farming in the main is one of the most extensive industries, and one of the best returns on capital investment in landscape and infrastructure that we do to provide safe, delicious, sustainable food from resources that cannot be used for anything else. And as we move forward, I believe that the challenge to reduce our environmental impact by increasing the efficiency of our farming production systems, not least in the use of genetics and improved genetics, will have a major impact there. I sincerely believe that the environmental capital that we can gain as an industry and improve by the use of what we do on a daily basis will have a very positive effect on the environment and the impact that we have on it moving forward. And if part of that, to my mind, is going to be how we challenge and tackle both the endemic and exotic diseases, hopefully that we don't have to challenge, but how we tackle them in the future. By reducing the impact of endemic diseases across the entire industry, it actually reduces our environmental footprint considerably, because healthy, well-treated for animals are far more efficient in what they do. They reduce the impact on the environment, and they lead to more productive systems that will give us what we want. SHORG over the years has set its stall out to research and find out the impact of endemic diseases, and have highlighted many times which ones are having the greatest impact. These can be found in our priorities that we want to see tackled in the future as part of the SHORG report. Whether it is the well-known endemic diseases like internal parasites, external parasites, mastitis, lameness, or more the emerging iceberg diseases, it's beholden upon us all to help and develop systems that can reduce the impact those diseases have at a farm level. And a lot of that will be achieved as we move forward by more and better collection of data. Data, if it's collected well and used effectively and efficiently, will help us in our challenge to reduce the impact of endemic diseases on our farms. And as somebody who's been involved in helping develop the Pathway programme, a key part of that will be the collection and utilisation of effective data. And whilst talking about data, I must mention a heartfelt plea for all of those that have been involved in the antibiotic work in our industry as we try to reduce the impact of antibiotic resistance and reduce the amount needed. The sheep industry is traditionally a low user of antibiotics, but we don't have the data to prove it. So as we launch the Electronic Medicine Hub through AHDB in the new year, I would encourage all farmers to input their data into it to give us the evidence base that we need to do to prove our case that we are lower users of antibiotics. And hopefully that leads me nicely into the second session, which will be chaired by Rebekah Stuart and features some of the leading farmers and consultants in the industry as they talk through safeguarding responsible medicine use. So therefore, Rebekah, the floor is yours. I wish you well with the session. I wish everybody great enjoyment for the rest of the day, and look forward to speaking to you all later on.
Many thanks for that, Charles. What a fantastic introduction to today's conference. So good morning, everyone, and I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all joining us this morning for the SHORG 2020 conference. Today we've got a great lineup of speakers, but kicking off this morning, we're looking at discussing safeguarding medicine use within the sheep industry. So we are joined by Fiona Lovatt and Lesley Stubbings this morning. These two ladies hardly need any introductions. Fiona is a veterinary consultant heavily involved in the Sheep Antibiotic Guardian Group, and Lesley is an independent consultant who's heavily involved in the SCOPS working group. Both of these ladies are very passionate about proactive animal health planning, predominantly focusing on the need to try and reduce antibiotic usage and anthelmintic usage on farm. Of course, this morning would not be complete without having some input or some discussion from farmers. So we are also joined by Kevin Harrison and Clare Wise. Kevin is a commercial farm manager based in South Gloucestershire. He has over 20 years of experience and currently farms 900 flock of North Country mules. He's also a key figure in SCOPS as our chairman and chairman for the NSA English Committee. Clare is a fifth generation beef and sheep farmer from County Durham. She was the winner of the Northern Sheep Farmer in 2018, and both Clare and Kevin are very passionate as well about this more proactive approach to on-farm activity. So this morning they'll be sharing some of their input into what they're doing on farm to try and ensure a more profitable and sustainable future. Before I hand it over to Fiona, if you do have any questions, please do pop those into the chat box as we're going through today's presentation. And hopefully we'll try and get these answered during the session. So Fiona, if you'd like to share your presentation, that would be great.
Thanks, Rebecca. I think my presentation, I don't think I'm in control. There we go. So thanks for the introductions, Rebecca. I'm going to crack straight on and introduce our first poll. Ooh. And what we want you to do, we're going to try really hard between the four of us not to argue on this. So I'm currently in charge, but the others are going to jump in. But for all our audience, we want you to think back, whether you're a farmer and you're thinking back to what things you were encouraged to do, or whether you're an advisor and this is something that did you encourage people, or were you encouraged to worm all your ewes pre-tapping and around lambing time? Were you encouraged to give every lamb a pill or an injection at birth? Were you encouraged to inject your whole flock with antibiotics to control lameness? Or to use a fluke and worm combination dose just in case? Or to inject all the ewes with oxytetracycline to prevent abortion before lambing? Or to dose every lamb with a wormer every 3 to 4 weeks, because that's a life cycle of worms. Have a think of these. We're going to launch the poll. Oh, I think we're launching the poll. Okay, that's brilliant. You've obviously all got a hang of it and have started to answer the questions. I think it's going to be live, but we're all a bit new to this. So we'll wait and see as people put in answers. And maybe Lesley, Kevin and Claire could sort of jump in and things that they may or may not have on this list.
Yeah, I think there's people are in there now. There's a specific page I think where we have to click at the top. There's an icon at the top for the poll, but it looks as though people have now accessed it.
I think people will be, that people are putting answers in.
Yeah. There we go.
These were the sort of obvious things we could think of. Certainly,
there's a lot more. We sort of, these are just obvious things, aren't they? Really, and I think the one premise that we were, when we planned this session, Fiona, was to sort of we all know that this is where we've come from, really, isn't it? And we really want to start to think about how we move away from it. But these are all things that I can certainly remember having drummed into me.
When you look down that list, I can certainly pick 3 out of there that people told me to do in the past, and I don't do now, and I also see the benefits of not doing them now, and it's not something I stopped doing all of them at once. It's different. I think routine foot trimming, I was probably stopped 11, 12 years ago, and worm all me, at tapping time it was, I better dose my ewes and crutch them and trim their feet, but make you feel like a fresh start. But as you sort of get things and stop doing them, you realise how unnecessary in certain ways they were.
Mm. Claire, can you recognise anything specifically on there?
Yeah, I mean, we worming all the ewes pre-lambing and antibiotics. It's like a religious, you do that because that makes your sheep more efficient. That I was brought up being told that, and now, it's only now we don't do them. You realise how labour intensive those things actually are, and we weren't actually reaping any benefits from it because our management now has advanced to the point where we don't need to do them and we can use science instead. But worming all ewes, routine lamb antibiotics, and certainly dosing lambs 3 to 4 weekly, that's something that we did year in, year out and never questioned it.
And I think we often feel that farmers get very frustrated when the rules change, and none of us like change. But I think it's always helpful to think back to other things that we used to think was perfectly normal that actually now we've changed. I remember being thrown into the back of a car with loads of other children and none of us wore seatbelts. My parents didn't think anything about it. You know, that's not something that I would do for my kids. We do learn and change, don't we? It's no different.
Yeah, we do. We discussed the drink driving one as well, didn't we, the other day? There's lots of things that actually, when you do think back, I mean, I suppose this year has taught us even more in terms of what we used to do and what we no longer do. You know, human beings can change their behaviour.
I think you're your age, Fiona and Lesley.
Well, I'll take the medal for that one, Kevin. I'll be the dinosaur today. Don't worry.
We're not going to start having an age competition, Kevin.
and it's all about the science, isn't it? I mean, so much of what we do is based on the science, and science moves on, and that makes us able to change what we do, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing there is, you know, that was the information at the time, but it's now that information. There's a lot of people doing a lot of work on this stuff, and try it in your own sort of pace and see the results. Don't just poo-poo it. It's sometimes when you talk about these things, people almost feel embarrassed to say the most up-to-date advice because they think that they're doing it right. They do those things to be good farmers. So,
yeah.
Okay, and we some of the detail as we go on through it with some of these things, because I'm quite sure there's some of these things that we've put in the poll and people are thinking, I'm still doing that, aren't I meant to still be doing that? So I think we can unfold the detail as we go on through, and part of this whole presentation is that there are not necessarily fixed rules, are there? The detail is important, so we'll uncover that as we unfold the presentation. Now, I have no idea how many people have voted or whether everyone's had a chance. Certainly out of this list, and I would say that's true, the antibiotic against abortion, people, that's the one that people have least. It's something that used to be pretty much routine before vaccination for endortic abortion. Isn't that right, Lesley?
Yeah, it was. I mean, the abortion vaccines came in the mid-90s, and prior to that, of course, that was the only action that we had available to us. So, sort of, yeah, I suppose we had a vaccine maybe a bit before that, but yeah, and a lot of people have moved away from that. It really is something that, but I think that just shows, doesn't it, that, you know, it takes time for these things. You know, worming all use is an interesting one, isn't it? That's come through as well, but yeah.
Okie doke. Shall we move on from that poll now? I think everyone's probably had a chance to go, and we're going to just look at antibiotics to start with here. Let me just see if I can move on.
Apparently, I've just seen a message. One or two people have been having problems accessing the poll. Apparently, we've just had a message, so just saying the texts are working on it. So hopefully, we've got one other poll. So hopefully, by the time we get to that, we'll be okay.
Okay, I can't actually move my slides at the moment. So, yes, I can. Right, fine, brilliant. So why does it matter? So we're going to just quickly, just got one slide here talking about antibiotic use, and why are we banging on about antibiotics so much? Why does it matter? And so just as a very quick history lesson, Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin in the 1920s, and since the 1940s, it's been commercially available. And so throughout all our lifetime, whatever age we are, we've expected to have success treating bacterial infections. And that's whether we go into hospital and have an operation, or it's whether it's in our sheep flock or on our farms. And any selection for resistance is always normal. So every time we give a dose of antibiotics, we reduce the chance of it working next time, because every single dose allows those bugs that do not get killed by the dose, they then have an advantage. So whether we're using an antibiotic as we should be, or whether we're misusing it and using it as we shouldn't be, every single time we use it, it makes it slightly less likely that it will work in the future. And that's just life. And then, but the other really awful thing with bacteria is they are incredibly clever. So when one bacteria gets resistance, it's able to pass that across to other bacteria, other different types of bacteria. So you might be using an antibiotic to control watery mouth or E. coli in your lambs, but those E. coli are clever enough to get resistance and then potentially pass that resistance across to other bacteria, causing other diseases in other stock on your farm. That's where it's really important. And we only have two solutions to this. We either discover more antibiotics. Now, that's brilliant, but I'm personally not holding my breath, because I know if we discover new antibiotics, there is no way that we will be using them in animals. They will be preserved for human use, because, you know, quite rightly, that's something that really concerns us. So our other option is to use what we have as carefully as we can. And that means we cannot use antibiotics in a routine prophylactic way. So the devil is in the detail. We are not saying we can never use antibiotics in certain ways, but what we are saying is routine prophylactics, i.e. every single lambing, I give every single lamb a dose just because that's what I do on my farm. That is something that's no longer acceptable. So that's the antibiotic one. And Lesley is going to talk equivalent for anthelmintics.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. And worms are similar in some ways as well, in the sense that, you know, every time we use a wormer, we're selecting for resistance as well. So there are some interesting similarities. In some ways, I'd like to say, though, that worms perhaps aren't quite as clever as bacteria, as Fiona has just described, in terms of being able to leap around. But of course, one of the other things, and if you like, our Achilles heel, is that we do use the group 3 anthelmintics as endecticides to control sheep scab. And that has really piled the pressure on, particularly onto those group 3s in the last 5 to 10 years. So, you know, wormers have been the linchpin really of worm control for a long while. And certainly when I was first trained, you know, it was 3 to 4 weeks of your lambs, and heavens above, it was heresy to suggest that you would actually do anything different. So there's just 3 things really I just want to remind you of that we're trying to tackle as far as anthelmintic resistance is concerned. So the first one is, as Fiona said, it's the same with antibiotics. How many times we use them is really important, because each time they're used, we kill the susceptible worms and we leave the resistant ones alive, and then they breed and they increase in the population. So how many times we use it, really important. The second one is how effective each dose is. And underdosing is not high tech, it's very basic stuff, but we know that lots of people are still underdosing, not deliberately, but because they're not weighing animals and dosing to the heaviest. They're not checking the equipment, and they're not even checking the dose rate, which varies tremendously from product to product, even within an anthelmintic group. And if you underdose, that is one of the most effective ways, if you like, of encouraging resistance. And it's one of the easiest ones to put right. So the third one is the proportion of the worm population that we expose. And this is really important in today's discussion, because what we're trying to say here is that if we can avoid treating some animals in the flock that don't need to be treated, we're going to reduce the pressure on selection for resistance. So that's when we start talking about which lambs might we treat, and also which ewes might we treat, as well as not treating them more often than we need to. So those are just the 3 headlines, just so that everyone's on a similar page, but a lot of similarities. So just to finish this sort of little section, we've split it up into 3. This really just introduces where we are now, in that, you know, what we're trying to do is we're trying to target medicine. So we're trying to look at risk and risk assessment. And in here, we're looking at using things like, you know, assessing the risk of bringing animals in, using tools to see whether or not there are problems there. For example, a sheep scab ELISA that we've now got available. And secondly, avoid unnecessary use of medicines when the risks are low, and particularly, as Fiona pointed out, the prophylactic use of both antibiotics and as anthelmintics have been used in the past as well. But we're all on a learning curve on this. You know, we started off with, quite deliberately, with, we've all heard, most of us have heard at least one of those things on that first poll, and we're all on a learning curve to be able to move away from that and towards the targeting and avoidance. And it's not as simple as being told what to do. because none of us change unless we feel motivated to do it, unless we feel confident and comfortable with it. So this is where really we come on to our next section, Fiona, I think, which is, this feeling that a lot of what we do with medicines and a lot of how we manage sheep is to do with what makes us feel good. So Kevin and Claire particularly, and we've had some discussions about this, haven't we? This feeling like a good farmer drives a lot of what we do. So we're going to we'll have a few other things come up in a minute, but I think at the moment, if perhaps, people who are listening, if you'd like to get on the chat box and start to put in there some of the things that make you feel good. A lot of people say sheep, it's all about profit, but actually there's a lot more to it than that makes you feel good about how you sheep farm. And while you're doing that, we'll ask Kevin and Claire to make some comment of what makes them feel good. What makes you go to bed at night feeling good, Kevin?
I think when I shut that yard gate at night, I like to think I've done everything I possibly can for my sheep. So I'm doing things right. I don't like to leave things undone, but I think first of all it has to be with, I have to be pleased with what I'm doing, and that's what's always driven me through my career over 30 years of looking after sheep. I need to be proud of my flock and know that they're doing their job well, but know that I'm doing my job well to look after them as well. And I think it's just a mixture of everything. It's not just whether I'm controlling the worms correctly or my lambing percentage is high. I just think it's a all-round approach all year round, and just feel that I'm doing the right job for the sheep and for myself.
Claire?
I think for me, it's knowing that somebody can walk on the farm uninvited, anytime, unexpected visit, and if I show them around my sheep, then they're healthy, and there's not bad doers, there's not limpers in the field. I mean, we all have a few, but it's not excessive. I just think it's that thing of being proud of it and knowing that you've done everything you can to make sure that flock is as productive and healthy, and anybody can walk on my farm anytime. You can't come in the house is a bomb site, but you can go around my sheep and I'll say, look, these are brilliant, aren't they? They look really great. And then the other thing that makes me quite happy is my kill sheets, because we have continentals. They're not the prettiest. If I take them to the mart, then they're not pretty white-faced lambs. They're big, strong, sort of mucky-looking lambs, but they kill out amazingly and they hit the top spec for the supermarkets. So I think also it's not always what you can see. It's knowing that all that input you've put in behind the scenes is making a difference as well. And that makes me feel like I'm doing my job well.
Fiona, you?
Yeah, no, well, so we've had some people put stuff in the chat. My technical skills I think Liz is passing the chat things on to us, but I think this slide sort of sums it up, doesn't it? So those are some of the things that Kevin and Claire, we did obviously talk about this in the run up for this. So here's something in the chat. Proud of the sheep, look well and happy and are not lame. Yeah, this productive, healthy stock that you're proud of is something that's of key. That's the sort of thing that makes you go to bed at night feeling good. There's another one here from the chat. Low mortality rates in ewes and lambs. All the ewes out there with twins. Healthy, comfortable sheep. Every year it's getting better, keeping it better. So that kind of those drivers making you feel like good farmers. I think now's the time for us to run our next poll, isn't it? Of which I may or may not be able to do. So I'm hoping someone in the background can run this poll. And it's what you think the most important factor is in maintaining a fit and healthy flock. So I'm not quite sure
I think Fiona, people have to scroll down to the bottom of the web page. So the next poll, scroll down the web page and you'll see polls near the bottom. And
okay.
Yeah, and then you should be able to get them. They'll come up as a page, and then there's a little icon at the top that looks like a sort of like a laptop in a. Right,
and the screen that's currently shared is must be old answers because no one had yet answered it. But anyway, and it's just got there, we've just got the summary of
here we go. That's
well, right. Because I'll have to read through each of the questions in turn, because actually you've just got the summary of them on there. So in terms of your most important factors in maintaining a fit and healthy flock, the top one is having access to the right medicines. Is it having used in the right body condition score? Is it that you're getting the feed right? Is it that you're giving the right treatment to the right animal at the right time, i.e. your timings of treatments? Is it your good stockmanship, of which currently that's where everyone's answered. So, I mean, clearly that is important. Is it your attention to detail, or is it that you've got good hygiene and management? Now, arguably, you could say all of these are really important. What we'd quite like you to do as you answer this poll is to answer a couple that you think are really important. So we're trying to get an idea of the most important. So we're not saying that any of these are not important, but we'd like to get an idea of what this audience feels the most important is. Is it access to the right medicines, having the use in the best body condition score, getting the food right, getting treatment timings right, right drug, right animals, right time, good stockmanship, good attention to detail, or good hygiene and management? And as Lesley said, what people have to scroll down to the bottom of the page, and then you can answer the poll down there, as from what I understand. I sound like a dinosaur, apologies.
Just out of interest, while people are doing that, Kevin, Claire, you know, obviously good stockmanship's coming up there quite high. What you know, what in terms of how you view that, what does that sort of encompass for you?
Well, that in a way, that good stockmanship embraces all of those, because good stockman should know all those things. And you know, you have to ask the question: are you using antibiotics and anthelmintics to ice over the cracks of poor management, poor stockmanship? You know, if you get all these right, then the interventions of having to use antibiotics and anthelmintics then become less, because you've got healthy flock and they're thriving, and you don't have to use as many. So that doesn't surprise me, that poll, because most people would consider themselves to be good stockmen, and as long as they've had the right advice and they listen to advice and they're changing advice, then they can do all the rest correctly as well.
Claire, do you think, given that stock, oh, there's a bit of echo. Do you think there's a risk that people may actually use the, you know, them want to be seen to having good stockmanship, you know, as something that pulls them away from being able to risk assess and pull away from medicines? Does it drive people towards using medicines, do you think, or the other way?
I think there's a lot of pressure, and I mean, certainly, I mean, we always feel short of labour here. I'm sure most farmers feel the same, and I think it's quite hard to press the pause button and actually look at what you're doing. It's very easy to be on the hamster wheel with sheep, isn't it? You know, you think you do the same things at the same time every year, and that gets your lamb flock away, and you know, and so I think part of being a good stockman is being a calm stockman, and what that means is you've got to plan, and you've got to press pause, and you've got to step back and look at all the other things on that list and plan ahead for how you're going to manage them, because that buys you the time to be able to look after your sheep really well. The last thing you want is to be running at 200 miles an hour every single day, doing the same thing, and never feeling like you can make a change, which ultimately could really improve your flock profitability.
Yeah, good point.
Someone's put into the chat, why have we not got a box here for genetics? And so we can take full responsibility for missing out important boxes. Apologies for that. And Liz has also put, if delegates are trying to submit a question, then you need to press a particular submit question now button, which is found under the video feed. If that makes sense. So if you are putting a question in, you need to press a submit button before we see it. I think, and apologies, Liz says that some delegates are still experiencing issues accessing the polls. And if that's you, I do apologise. Hopefully that we can get the feel of this. You know, we're not in any way, I don't think any of us are saying that any of these things are not important, but it's actually getting the balance of what people think are the most important.
Yeah, there's no
good stockmanship views as encompassing everything else on the list. It's an essential skill. Okay. Do we stick with this poll, or shall we move on? What's your feeling?
I think we should move on.
Right. Can I go back to sharing my screen, please? Whoever's in control of the polls. Thanks. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, just moving on from that, and Kevin, I'm going to come back to you really, because we just felt at this stage, we ought to just make the pause. Obviously, nutrition was in there. Stockmanship overrode it, which we kind of expected it would do. But Kevin, I'm going to come to you on this, because this is your quote here. You look after the you and she'll look after you. Because, we've done a lot of work in the last few years looking at body condition score particularly, and how important that is. But come back to you for a comment really as to how important it is.
It was just something that rolled off my tongue when we were chatting a little while ago, and I guess you've got to put the ram in there as well, and we mustn't forget him, because he is half your lamb flock. But it is just that it's not right, so it's tupping today. I better go and get my rams, put them in with the ewes. I've been thinking about tupping for 3 months. I'm now thinking about lambing it and keeping my ewes in a good condition as much as possible now up until Christmas. So when we house our ewes, so when they come in, they're in the correct body condition. So I'm not chasing them up till lambing, and I can maintain their body condition. And likewise, when they go out, I'm then thinking about them being in a good condition and being able to start redeveloping their reproductive system ready for next. So it's not just about looking after the ewe today, and the lambs when they're born and what they need. It's about looking after them all the way through, and going back to what I said a little bit earlier on about, you're not then having to use antibiotics or anthelmintics to ice over the cracks.
Yeah. Claire?
Yeah, I mean, I was unpick, because we've obviously been chatting the last couple of weeks. I was sort of trying to unpick when we started using less of everything, and I realised the game changer for us was when we started testing our silage and getting a proper ration done for the ewes, because the difference that made to the colostrum quality of the ewes at lambing was so significant. The sticking plaster of E. coli treatment of doing a dose for every lamb became unnecessary, because we got the ewes right, we got the colostrum right. I changed my management to ensure that colostrum was going into those lambs instead of an antibiotic. And yeah, I mean, exactly what Kevin said there. I was trying to work out when it changed for us, and I realised when we started perhaps looking after the ewes a little bit better, everything else became a lot easier to make those changes.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. I think that's really important, because those of you who know me, just perhaps as somebody who does with worms, some of you also know I do a lot of nutrition as well. And in terms of what Fiona and I have been talking about with reducing antibiotic use and anthelmintic use, if an animal isn't fit and healthy, it's not even going to respond to a vaccine as well as it should do. So the whole thing, their ability to mount an immune response. Somebody mentioned genetics, of course. The strength of that acquired immunity can be affected by genetics. But even then, if we don't get the feeding right, then that stronger potential won't be reached either. So, nutrition is really important if we're going to get the basics right, and we're going to start to, whittle it down to those animals then that do perhaps need some treatments.
It's building blocks, isn't it? It's like, a game of Tetris. You've got to get them all lined up into the right place so you can achieve what you want to achieve. And it's not just one thing, and I think Claire was saying, trying to wonder when she did it, but I think you actually unwittingly do it gradually, don't you? And you see the results, and then reap the rewards at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's sometimes easier to think about yourself or your family. When you're fit and healthy, you don't need medicines, so you don't need to go to the doctor. And that's, I suppose, as vets, we're classic at thinking we're going to have to reach for a treatment. Actually, if everything's robust and fit and healthy, there is no need for treatment.
Yeah, and we're learning that more and more, aren't we? Particularly when, that worming use is very high on the list on the first poll. And, all the work that we're doing, I'm currently doing another project at the moment. If the ewe is in good body condition, then the amount of contamination she puts out in pasture is drastically reduced, as opposed to the ewe that's in poorer condition, irrespective of her litter size. So it really does have a massive impact.
Yeah, and when you have got a fit, healthy, robust flock, then you can afford to target where you need the medicines, and you don't need unnecessary medicines. Now, I think it's worth saying here, and there are some, I was thinking particularly about where whole flock treatments are necessary. And of course, Lesley, sheep scab would be one of those situations, wouldn't it, where we can't be targeted. If we've got a scab problem, we do need to treat every single animal.
Yeah, we do. But I think the key is to use your biosecurity to try and minimise the risk of the scab problem in the first place. And then the second thing is, to get a diagnosis, because so many scab treatments are used and it's not scab, it's lice. And so, or coreoptes, as you and I were talking about just the other day, as a possibility. So, I think there are things that we can do. But yes, when we do get down to it with scab, which again is another reason why we've got to get it down to do we really need to do this? And possibly nowadays, can we think in terms of using an OP plunge dip as an alternative to take some of the pressure off the anthelmintics?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a few comments coming in there about nutrition.
Yeah, I saw those.
That's an interesting one, and it's going to be more challenging as we go. I mean, my system is quite heavily reliant on feed, and I'm not ashamed of it. But, as we're looking now towards elms and sustainability and more grass-fed diets, that producing enough protein to create the good quality milk and colostrum is, and getting that nutrition right is really going to be important, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think having confidence in what forage can do, the sheep's a ruminant. And if you look at spring grass in early lactation, spring grass is more than adequate, both energy-wise and protein-wise, if there's enough of it there to satisfy her requirements. She wouldn't be very successfully evolved if it wasn't. But it's having that confidence, isn't it? And having the quality of the forage there as well.
And the genetics.
And the genetics, yeah.
Yeah, there's a comment there about maybe some farmers are unintentionally underfeeding. Is there a lack of confidence to regularly body condition score, analyze forage, do the stuff to put in good feeding? And I think that probably is the case. I certainly see amazing differences where we actually do sort out the ration for the ewes, especially in unnecessary, both unnecessary worming treatments and unnecessary antibiotics in lambs.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would both underline the fact that, when you get involved with the flock for the first time, you've got to get the nutrition right before you can really start making big inroads into anything. If the nutrition isn't right, it's, difficult.
Okay.
I think people get scared of feeding ewes because they equate feeding your ewe with lambing problems. I mean, Fiona, you've seen our ewes many times, and people think they're on the fitter side, which they are, but yet we barely lamb anything because we make sure with genetics and appropriate feeding. But I think people get a bit worried about the concept of feeding them. Will I get lambing problems? No, you won't. You're actually going to make your life easier in the long run, but you've just got to feed them the right thing.
Yeah. Oh, and it's horrible when you hear people say, I don't feed them in the end because I want to get the lambs out. And you just think, well, that's such misguided. That's a very good point to make, Claire. Thank you.
Yeah, and also, the sort of it doesn't matter if the ewe's really thin when we wean the lambs because she'll have worked really hard. There's a huge amount of evidence now that says that ewe will let you down next year if you let her get too thin. So, yes, you can use a little bit off her back, but keeping her within a reasonable range of body condition score is, there's a lot of evidence now to support that.
So once we've got our fit, healthy, well-fed, robust flock, and when I say well-fed, I mean appropriately fed, obviously, we're looking at plan, prevent and protect. Charles mentioned it there in his introduction. And I just wonder whether Claire and Kevin could come in and talk about how they see planning ahead, what practical things you put in place to plan ahead for your flocks.
Well, number one, pick when you plan. We used to try and do our planning in January just before lambing. I was always frazzled. It never got followed through on. So I now we flock plan in July, which is a quiet time, I suppose. But yeah, just plan at the right time of year. Give yourself space to digest it, and then and you don't have to change everything on your farm in one go. Just do little things. We started with the E. coli dose. We started by the first year. We just didn't do the singles, and the sky didn't fall in, and it was okay. And then the second year I did any of the twins that looked fit and good to go. I didn't do those. I just did the ones I hadn't seen lamb at 3 a.m. and I wasn't sure they'd got the colostrum. And now because we just make sure that we give them colostrum instead. I think we probably only do maybe 10% of the flock, which might be gimmers or ones that I've missed somehow. But we didn't change everything overnight. But by using planning and planning at a calmer time of year, it gives you that confidence to actually give things a go.
Sorry, the plumber's just come to the door. I go through that and say, well, planning. I think my family would say I probably worry too much and think too much. So I'm planning all the time, and I shouldn't. But I always plan it. Like I said earlier, always planning a good 2 or 3 months ahead. Prevent. It's like preventing is we hygiene and just making sure that everything is right. Attention to detail. Someone we all know, Claire Fithian, gave me a book some years ago, and it had a picture of about every disease that a sheep could have, and it was all in pictures, and it was a terrifying thing. So I often think, what don't I want rather than what do I want in my flock, and then I try and prevent those things from happening. And then when you do get those things right, then you realise that you didn't actually need that antibiotic to be put into down every lamb's throat. It is only the ones that do need it, and we use a refractometer now, just simple thing, about 25 quid, and we and the vet students that we have help us. They love that sort of thing, just a quick squirt of colostrum on that and just see the quality. And then if they do need it because the colostrum quality is low, then they will get an antibiotic. Also, just doing your fecal egg counting and make sure that you do need to do what you got and getting your grazing management right and things like that. Protection, just follow the right advice. People like yourselves, doing a flock health plan and just getting everything right. I think someone said in the comments, stockmanship, stockmanship is a dangerous thing without the right advice. So we need to get that advice from the right people as well.
Great. I think in terms of when we're talking good colostrum and lambing shed times, a joint till is one thing that we have the most complicated discussions with people about prophylactic use of antibiotics, and I think really that advice and working really closely and getting into the detail is very, very important. So increasingly I've always had farmers say, if I don't jab these lambs, I don't know what's going to happen in 10 days time. And increasingly we're getting the confidence to say, actually, just because something happens one year is not an indicator it's going to happen the next year. And where we do have the confidence to actually hold someone's hand and walk along with them, maybe sometimes we do need to target metaphylactic treatments to a group of animals. But I'm becoming more and more confident to say there is never a situation where what you're going to have to do next lambing. You've got to wait till next lambing and work closely with somebody who understands the situation and can pinpoint the detail and put things in place. But don't think this is my farm, I have to do this every year, because that's not the case generally. Let me just, sorry, there's too many things to do at once here. Just handing it back across to you, Lesley.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, really, it comes back down. A lot of this comes down to considering the risks, doesn't it? Really. And I think one of the things that I come across certainly within the anthelmintic side of things is that people look at what we used to do and see that as being low risk. And actually, when we start looking at doing something slightly differently, doing monitoring and what have you, they see that as slightly higher risk. And it's having that confidence that it isn't higher risk, it is just different. So, I mean, Kevin and Claire, on this one particularly, biosecurity, it's a dreadful word, isn't it? Biosecurity, quarantine, we don't seem to be able to come up with a better, less scary way about it. But I'd just be interested, and I think people listening would be interested to know how you go about that, because I find, or I would say, that's one of the times when our flocks are most at risk. We're going to buy someone else's problems in. Who wants to go first? Claire.
Well, yeah, we have a closed female flock for that reason, and I'd had enough of buying in abortion, buying in other issues, so we have a closed female flock. I'm about 50% of our tups are homebred, but if I do get anything in, we stick to the isolation period. You'll use the appropriate wormer. Everything. I would never buy a ram one day and chuck it in with the ewes the next, because it's not worth it. And I think it all comes down to having that great relationship with your vet. Times have changed now. You don't just pick the phone up to your vet when there's an emergency. I'll pick the phone up to my vet and say, I'm planning to do X, Y, or Z. What do you think? And biosecurity is part of that. I'm going to buy this in. What do you think I should do to make sure I don't bring risk in? And if I am doing this, should we be testing for something? And I think that's just be informed, and then just don't go out and just buy anything and whack it in your field and think it's going to be okay, because you might get away with it, but sooner or later it's going to bite you.
Yeah, just because you paid a lot of money for it. Kevin, you buy females in, don't you? So how do you tackle it?
I do, yeah. So 20 odd years ago, we'd have just got on the M6, whizzed up, gone to the market, got the amount I needed, the nice sheep I liked, looked at them, and with their balloon dip on, got the cheapest lorry, too big to get up the hill to the farm, chuck them in the nearest field, and drive around them for a week, thinking how wonderful they were, and then give them their treatments. But we've moved on considerably since then, and I think I've said this in a previous webinar this year. It's that the cost of the price of good quarantine over poor, the cost of poor quarantine, and so now I buy them all off of one farm, someone I know well and trust. I've bought them off the same farm for years. I know they do their job. I'm aware of the scabrous. I know they dip them. So I can, and now with the ELISA test, that's a game changer as well. So I'm not bringing them home and giving in the blanket scab treatment, but a good, something like, the group 4s or 5s as a quarantine, and I'm careful what fluke treatment I give them. Obviously, I go on my vet's advice. I'm not here to give advice on what products to use today, but I always choose my quarantine treatments carefully. To make sure I'm not bringing anything on the farm. I look at that sheep as that there is the potential to wreck my life for the next 12 months. It's a bag of bugs, resistant bugs, and it could be a bag of diseases and parasites that I don't want on the farm. And
how long would you keep them separate, Kevin? How long would you try to keep those separate from the rest?
Well, now I get a lorry that's big enough to go right up to my sheep shed, so I tip them pop them in the shed overnight, and then give them the treatments, and because we buy our ewe lambs and we don't top them, I mean, I'd say they're separate for a good 18 months, but that eventually they'll start grazing the same fields. But they'd be apart for a good, definitely 3 weeks. And when it comes to rams, it's definitely 3 weeks. It's 3 weeks, but it's always longer with most of them.
Yeah.
So I certainly would not. I mean, it makes me shiver now to think of bringing sheep on the farm and then putting them with other animals, within 3 weeks, definitely.
Yeah, because I mean that's when we're at the most vulnerable, isn't it? So we can do everything else right, but you can bring all sorts of stuff in. So I think we probably need to move on a bit, Fiona. But just on that protect, we haven't said too much about the tools, but obviously the tools we've got testing tools, we've got breeding, which has been mentioned before, and a lot more work going into that. Some really good stuff coming forward now in terms of ewes being bred for lower fet counts and lower contamination, therefore. And obviously vaccines. I think lots of talk about vaccines these days for humans as well. But, you know, making sure we're really getting the best out of those, which we're not always doing, I think, at the moment.
Lesley, just think you mentioned there as well, is cod on the quarantining. You know, if you put them in a shed overnight, you're going to spot hopefully anything like that, and you can isolate them and treat them. You know, it's something we haven't really touched on, but it's very important too.
Very important. Very important. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I think I mean, we just thought we'd cover off now, and then we'd take some more questions which are piling in. But you know, just to sort of pat ourselves on the back a little bit, because it's quite easy, I think, sometimes that people like Fiona and I are seen as being ear bashing everybody, saying you've got to change, you've got to change. But actually, over the last few years, we have made a lot of progress. I don't think I'd be sane if I didn't think we'd made any progress. So you know, we have a massive reduction in the amount of wormer used in adult ewes. I think, you know, getting rid of this pre-tupping thing, as Kevin said, a lot more people are taking that on. We're seeing a massive increase in the use of FECs, better access to them. We've got a lot less routine worming of lambs, a lot more targeted treatment. People are getting a better knowledge of their resistance status. It's still a hard nut to crack. You still need to know. People are still hiding from it, but we're getting there. And we've also got a greater use of the tools that we can help with fluke control, because clearly fluke is a real problem to us. We've got such a limited repertoire of medicines for fluke, and obviously triclobendazole is under a lot of pressure. We have to be a lot more savvy in terms of how we protect those and use them by testing and only treating when we need to. And sheep farmers are asking for more help and advice. You know, there's a lot more, I think, Fiona, compared to even 5 years ago, there's a lot more vets out there who are really investing time and effort in the sheep side of things. There are more people that can be turned to now who can give advice. So, you know, it's a positive story, but it takes time.
And then if we're thinking about what progress we've made with antibiotics, and the rumour report has literally just been released in the last week. So you can go to the rumour website and access, and that tracks the progress we've made on the last 4 or 5 years of targets. And it also sets out what our targets are going forward for the next 5 years. And sheep are in there along with all the other livestock sectors. But one of the things that I'm most proud of us as an industry is over the last 4 years, we've reduced the sale of lamb oral antibiotics by 34%, which was what our target was. I don't think there's room for complacency. There never is. I've said to vets, you know, if you've got any sheep farmers out there who are still thinking, I have to do that next year on every single lamb that's born, then we've got work to do. And, you know, we have still got a lot of progress to make, but we've got to be proud of where we've come from. And there have been loads of good conversations. It's hard to have those conversations. We've got 50 to 60,000 sheep farmers in the UK, maybe even 70,000, and lots of different vets to get to. You know, the challenge is enormous. And compared to some of the other industries, which is much more aligned, the sheep industry is complicated and difficult, but we have made huge progress, which is why the reason we were shortlisted for an Antibiotic Guardian Award was for our communication to the sheep industry. So we kind of have to cling on to these great progress we are making. We know we have more people vaccinating. You know, oxytetracycline treatments of used in late pregnancy is something that you know, most people, and both Claire and Kevin said, yeah, we did that 15 years ago. We didn't realise people still did, or maybe you didn't do it. Sorry, but maybe you both said you didn't do it. But either way, a lot of people were doing it as routines 15, 20 years ago. And vaccination is the obvious. And for most people, that's just a no-brainer now. And we've evidenced concrete reductions in lameness. So as we have better control, we have fewer lame animals that we do need to treat with antibiotics. So yeah, let's be proud of the progress we've made. I did say we would talk about colostrum here. I think we might cover that off in questions. We've had a lot of questions about colostrum, specific things about colostrum quality. That's one of the reasons we're managing to reduce lamb or antibiotic use, is because, as Claire said very clearly, as people are getting nutrition right and making sure the ewes are right and the colostrum is right, the colostrum is a key thing that means you don't have to routinely use oral antibiotics in your lambs. So we might have some detail to cover off in the questions, but maybe I should just move on next slide, because we just we'll go back to Kevin and Claire really, and just talk about how you've managed to do what you've managed to do.
Surrounding your business is only as good as the advice and that you take, I think, and it's about surrounding yourself with the right people. And I know you laughed at me when I said shy kids get knout, but it's true. I've stalked you for like a decade now, Fiona, haven't I? And it's like have that great find the vet that you can have a two-way conversation with, and find a nutrition. Put someone who does nutrition. Just surround yourself with really great people. Ask for help, and don't just keep doing things. So, just ask for help. Don't be shy. Anybody who wants to sell you something, who wants to give you advice, who wants to have any interaction with you and your flock, milk everybody you can for as much advice as you can, because by getting that information on board, that's what gives you the strength to make decision and changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been looking after near on 1,000 sheep for over 30 years, and one of the people on this screen has been there from the start. We won't say which one. And I'm heavily involved with others now, including Fiona and Philippa Page. I use her a lot for my health planning, and exactly what Claire said. It's about I talk. I always pick in people's brains about sheep, talking to them about what they're doing, and from years ago, with discussion groups, and you just listen around the table and say, well, he's doing that. Oh, that's a good idea. But get it backed up with professional advice as well. But just management things you can pick up. There are dangerous places to pick up information. You've only got to look at some of the social media platforms where there's some dreadful information given out and makes you cringe. So just talk to the right people about what you're doing. There's so many really good sheep farms out there, and we're going to have to use the word passionate, and they are passionate about what they do. So yeah, and that's all I've ever done. Is I just thought I did a normal job, and which is what I still think I do, but I seem to be sat here in front of everyone. But just take pride in what you do. Look after the sheep, and look after the ewe, and she'll look after you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a really good point there, Kevin, about where people get advice from as well. Is obviously finding Claire as well, that find the right people that you trust. And I'd also make a bit of a gambit there for perhaps the Scots website, and also for the work that Fiona's doing on Rumour and on Shorg. Those are places where you can go, and things there's no axe to grind. It is, go there. If someone's trying to tell you something on a social media platform, an alcoholic can go out there and go on 20 different feeds, and 19 of them will tell them that they're an alcoholic, and the 20th will tell them that they're not, and they'll believe the one that it's not. So, you use those sources of information as your backstop, really, for the sense check is really important.
And the other thing we've always done, and whether it's with Lesley or Flock Health or with HDB Benchmark, and that's monitor what you're doing. Because if you're monitoring what you're doing, if you're monitoring your results and your inputs and your costs, when you do these things, then you know that you've decreased mortality, or you know that your sheep have been in a better body condition score this year. So what did you do right? So benchmark, monitor, and you don't have to share what you're benchmarking. You can just compare it to others, but always be aware of what those figures mean to you and your business. Don't beat yourself up over someone else's figures. Explain why they're all figures, and try and explain to yourself why your figures are different, and try and do the best that you can do and improve on your monitoring and benchmarking year on year.
Yeah, I think that's hugely motivating, actually, to know where you were, and to, even if you only make a tiny bit of progress. There are some farms where we know we've won something if they manage the first 2 days of lambing without using a prophylactic antibiotic, and they might have to reach for it, but we managed 2 days where they've had 2 days worth of lambs go out without a dose. You know, that is sometimes as much progress you can make in 1 year. So I think, but unless you're monitoring it, you kind of can't celebrate those wins. So that's a really good point. I wondered, shall we just, before, we've got one more slide, guys, but we've got maybe 3 minutes to cover off some of these questions. There's a few specific ones about outdoor lambing and reducing antibiotic use, and I think the wonderful thing about the sheep industry is the variety in the types of systems we have, and there are pros and cons to every sort of system. So and yes, there are occasions where outdoor lambing is great and we don't have the same level of contamination perhaps as we have in a lambing shed, but equally we then maybe have other challenges, and hypothermia and starvation is on the other side of the coin. So I would never say a blanket go outside lambing and all your problems be solved, because I don't think that is the case. So every single thing, we have to make measured decisions about everything here. So there are a few givens, and good, decent colostrum, using good health, mothering ability, those sort of things that we've talked about are really important standards. But I don't think any one of us on the call would say it's got to be this particular system to work, because we work with a load of different systems, and we see pros and cons in all sorts. So I don't know if you want to add to that sort of thing, Lesley.
Yeah, I think I agree. You know, I mean, there's one or two other questions coming up here as well about, you know, given nutrition underpins everything, you know, are we really getting that across to the industry? And I think the answer is no, we don't, because there is a tendency, I think, to sort of jump on what's perhaps a little bit sexy and attractive at the time, rather than go back to nutrition is the basics, isn't it? But there's no doubt, you know, I think Kevin and Claire have said this really well today, that it underpins everything. So, yeah, you know, I think we take that one on the chin, that we haven't been pushing that as hard as we should have done. And it's not about chucking a load of supplement at them in the last few weeks before lambing. It goes far, far further than that, as the body condition score work has shown over the last few years. So, you know, I think absolutely we need to be able to do a lot more on that. You know, and the outdoor lambing situation, we shouldn't be so scared of it. You know, we know what the nutritional requirements of these ewes are, and if we're measuring the dry matters and we're actually putting that in front of them, I think one of the dangers with some of the outdoor lambing ones is that, you know, people aren't controlling how much they're eating, and some of these ewes are getting pretty damn big far too early and causing problems. So it's about knowing where you need to be and monitoring it the whole time. We can deal with it. We know what she requires.
Yeah. Maybe
okay. This was just the last slide, wasn't it, really? But it was really just to say to people in sort of as a final gambit, and Kevin and Claire have, I think, really emphasised this. Take your time. You know, we're not going to go from where we started with our first poll, and things that were ingrained in our psyche really deeply. You're not going to do it all at once. And, you know, even the antibiotic thing, even if it's a small percentage every year, it's moving away from the blanket. You know, build your confidence slowly. Every farm's different. Your farm is different to everyone else's. Just don't look over the fence and think you're going to just be able to blueprint what someone else has done. You have to understand your own challenges and risks. Achievable pace, and as Kevin says, tracking your progress. And I think very importantly, you know, Kevin was, you know, enjoy the results. You know, there's a danger, isn't there, that everyone thinks that because we are looking at being more responsible and safeguarding medicines, as I said earlier, there's a risk associated with it, and we're not going to feel so good about it. The people who are doing it, in my experience, and I think that everyone else on the panel, are actually getting better results. A lot better results when we measure it, and when these things all come together. So, you know, it is something to be enjoyed, and it is a positive move forward.
Yeah. Can I just say thanks to, really heartfelt thanks to Kevin and particularly for it's really exposing to sit there and be you know, and we really appreciate learning from your experiences and hearing what happens on your farms, and yeah, thank you for bearing all.
Yeah, thanks very much. We wanted to hear what it really looked like in practice, and you guys have been brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'd just like to thank all for everything they've done over the years, and I wish the new Ruminant Health Group all the best of luck. And they've got big shoes to fill, and we need to keep.
We do, and the report is. I haven't read it in detail, but I had a quick look through it. It's a good read.
Yeah, brilliant. Back to Rebekah then. Thanks everyone for all your input and questions, and I realise we haven't got to them all, but thank you for interacting and coping with our slightly dodgy polls that I don't think were working that well. Is Rebekah there?
Yeah. Fab. Thank you. Thanks very much, guys, for your presentation. There were some very open and honest discussions there. I think it just highlighted the need to consider the farming calendar as a whole, because ultimately everything goes hand in hand. Please, I think there was great questions and discussion throughout. We have slightly overrun, so on that note, I'm going to say we have a refreshment break now. So please take the time to go and check out our sponsorship pages and things, have a cup of tea, and join us at 11:30 for the next session, where we'll look at some of the key issues or areas of priority for the future moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.